Welcome to round number 2 of the World Chess Championship. And as a recap, last time in round number 1, after Ding was down on time, he was in a rough position. He turned it around, not only came back on the clock, but also made a series of very accurate and good moves and ultimately won the game. He goes into this round leading 1-0. We talked about how that was a very big victory for him. And going into this game, it's really important to see how Gukesh responds to this. This is not a great start to the tournament. Is he going to be able to handle that? Is he going to crack and just fall apart? Like, what's going to happen, right? That's an important thing to keep an eye on as we go into round 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the game. Ding is playing as white, and he plays the move e4. Now, last year in the World Championship, I don't believe he played e4 in a single game. He was playing a lot of d4. He was playing some English. But I don't think I remember seeing a single game with e4. So this is interesting because generally speaking, e4 can lead to some more exciting games, to some more tactical games. There are a lot of sharper lines. Of course, you have both of those in e4, d4 in any opening, but just generally speaking, e4 tends to be a bit more exciting in my opinion. We get e5, very common response. Knight to f3, attacks the pawn, controls the center, and black plays knight c6. Now, excuse me. Right here, a lot of the top players are going to play bishop b5. This is called the Ruy Lopez, and we saw quite a few games like this in the last World Championship, particularly when Jan was playing as white against Ding. But Ding Liren decides to play bishop c4. This is called the Italian game. Now, this is a fantastic opening for beginners and intermediate players because the bishop on this diagonal causes all kinds of problems for the black king. There's lots of sacrifices where you can give up your bishop and lure out the king. There's an opening called the fried liver attack. For example, knight f6. This is not what happened in the game, by the way. Knight g5, you attack here. They try to stop you by blocking off your bishop. You take, and when they recapture, you can go into the fried liver attack where you sacrifice a knight to lure the king out. Then the queen comes out with a fork. The only way for them to not lose their knight is to defend. And now you're attacking. You can keep attacking with your knight. It's a fun opening. Lots of beginners and intermediates like to play it and have great success. Okay, so this is a nice move. I like to see this. Now, of course, Gukesh is not a beginner, not an intermediate player, and he's not going to, fall for some cheap tactic like that. But it's just an interesting opening in my opinion. So back to the game. He doesn't play the two knights defense. He plays bishop c5. And the thing about bishop c5 is you leave the queen controlling the g5 square, so the knight actually can't go there. So you can't go for this attack immediately. You just simply lose a piece, right? And if you think you can play here and get fancy, it doesn't work because the queen invades and now your rook is under attack and your position falls apart. So Ding plays the move d3. Now d3 is played sometimes. c3 is probably a little more common in castling. But d3 is still up there. Okay, so nothing super crazy just yet. So d3, we get knight f6. And right here is where Ding kind of plays I don't want to say a sideline, but it's not that common. He plays knight c3. And the reason this is not that common is because most people are going to castle or play c3. And you want your pawn on c3 because it helps you to play d4 at some point in the future. And this is kind of the typical way that you want to approach the position. You want to push your pawns forward in the center, and black has a lot of pieces controlling that square. You need support, and c3 gives you the support that you need. Now you have 1, 2, 3 defenders. So when you're ready, of course you have to watch out for this, but when you're ready, you're going to play d4 and push over the center. So when Ding plays knight c3, he's saying, well, I'm not really worried about playing that anytime soon. I'm just going to focus on other stuff by developing my knight here. So it's kind of takes the game into slightly uncharted territories. Of course, this position has been reached, but it's just not as common. We get a6, and he's a lot of times when they play this, they're giving their bishop a place to go. So for example, if white were to ever try to attack that bishop, you can always just go back here and get away from the knight, right? And the bishop pair, or trading one of your knights for a bishop, is usually a good strategy. And so Gukesh is saying, nope, I'm not gonna worry about that, and that's why we see a6, I think. So a6, and Ding plays the move a4. Now, similar reason here is, okay, you get your bishop. You don't have to worry about getting traded for a knight. You also stop b5. So if black wanted to play b5 and try to chase this bishop around and gain space, you can't do that anymore, because now if you play b5, guess what? I'm going to take it, and then I'm going to take the rook. There's a little pin here. And this is a nice tactic to remember, guys. If you're ever worried about somebody pushing a pawn on you on b5 or g5 like this, if you have a rook lined up on their rook, just move your pawn forward and you stop it. Right, as long as that rook is undefended, because you create this pin. and they can never do that, or they simply just lose the pawn. All right, so good one to remember there. So he plays a4, and we get d6. And what you will notice is the position is very similar. It's almost exactly the same, except with these moves thrown in, right? Castles, h6. He's probably wanting to stop something from going here, which, you know, a lot of beginners will do this without even developing their pieces. Like, they start the game, they just play a6 and h6 immediately, and they get into trouble because they haven't developed their pieces quickly. But you'll notice that Gukesh is also developing, okay? And he's not like really behind in development. You could say one move behind because he hasn't castled, but he understands what's going on. He can make decisions like this that I usually tell beginners, like, don't make so many pawn moves, right? But in this case, obviously, it's a different situation. So bishop to e3 is played. Now, this is an interesting move because you are giving the option for your opponent to trade, and now Ding would have the doubled pawns. And generally speaking, we say doubled pawns are not a good thing. So why is he doing this? If Gukesh would have taken and this happens, yes, you get the doubled pawns. Yes, maybe this could be a weakness in some cases. However, it's very easy to defend that with the queen, maybe with the rook, maybe even my knight jumping forward would defend it. And that pawn, actually, remember we talked about pushing d4. The pawn supports that. So you can very easily play d4 now. Also, this square, black can't use it for their knight, which sometimes they can. And also, the rook on f1 is now open. And you got the bishop on c4, and all of a sudden, you might be able to generate an attack here. Maybe I move my knight and I jump in here. Maybe the queen comes over somehow. You can also use this open diagonal now to invade with your queen. You get a lot of benefits for those doubled pawns. And if you are able to play d4 and black trades, guess what? Your pawns aren't even doubled anymore, right? So because of that, sometimes these doubled pawns the benefits can outweigh the risks, right? And it's funny because after bishop e3, black plays bishop e6. And we get the exact same situation for both players, right? They both have the option to take that, and they don't. Actually, Ding plays this move a5, which is an interesting move because when you push your pawns so far forward, you have to be careful that they don't just get captured, right? Now, of course, the rook is defending the pawn from the knight, but if black ever tries to play a move like bishop to b4 at some point, I think like trading and then playing bishop b4, you now have two attackers on this pawn and only one defender. And I don't see a way that white can defend that. So why did Ding play this? Well, I guess Stockfish is telling me knight to d5 is going to happen. And then if black takes this, there's some counterplay here, knight h4, and your knight's jumping in, and you're basically... It's a gambit. It's a pawn sacrifice. Hey, take my pawn. I'm going to get some counterplay in different ways. Actually, you can see the eval bar in this position. Stockfish likes this for white. So there was something there that Ding was preparing. The other thing, if you notice the clock, we are on move, move 9. He hasn't even spent 3 minutes yet, and he's played this move. That means that he's studied it. He's prepared it. He's looked at it ahead of time with the computer, with his team, and he knows what's going on. He's not just like, yeah, I'll just push a pawn and see what happens. Like, no, he knows what's up. So it's not like, he blundered a pawn or something. This was prepared, right? This was, he was hoping, or maybe he was ready if Gukesh decided to hunt down this pawn. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. Instead, Gukesh trades here. Now, we talked about the doubled pawns when the bishop's captured here. This is another way to give Ding doubled pawns, and this is what Gukesh goes for. But again, yes, you get the doubled pawns, which is a little bit of a weakness, but you get some things in return. What do you guys think you get in return for these doubled pawns? Well, if you said half open d-file, you would be correct. So now you can start to use your pieces to put pressure on here. You can bring your rooks here. Your queen is lined up there. And also, look at this vice grip on d5. Like, you got all these pieces controlling you. You can jump your knight and you have lots of support there. So it's not all bad news, okay? And what's funny is now, after castles, Ding does the same thing. And so we get this very symmetrical position. It's almost the exact same, except Ding has played a4, a5, and Gukesh has the pawns on a6 and h6. So you could say white, okay, has a slight advantage with the space because the pawn is pushed forward. Black's position is a little bit cramped, but it's really, really subtle. And sometimes when you only have one open file, it's very easy to get a lot of trades, right? Because that's the only place you can put your long-range pieces, the rooks and the queens, really, where they can be effective. And after b3, that's exactly what we see. We start to see some trades. So queen takes d1, rook captures. Of course, you want your rooks to be on the open files because they're more effective. Look at all the squares that they control on the open file compared to somewhere else where it just doesn't do much. And right here, Ding says, that's enough. I don't think so. And he moves his rook here. Now, if you're a beginner watching this game, I would like to tell you, please don't do this, okay? If somebody puts a rook on an open file, it's the only open file in the game, don't move your rook away. Don't do that. Because you are giving up total control of the open file to your opponent when you do that, right? So why is Ding spending a move to do that? Well, he's probably trying to avoid just trading everything and having a draw, right? Because if you just trade all the pieces, it's just going to be a draw. I mean, it's totally equal. There's not much happening. Another thing that you have to be careful of is this rook is guarding this pawn, right? So at some point, if the rook trades and you try to recapture, you might end up losing a pawn over here, right? So I think that's probably another reason as well. But be really, really careful if you're beginner intermediate. Don't give up control of the file. Usually what I recommend is just leave your rook sit there, allow them to take, then you get to recapture, and you are the one who gains control of the file. Like I said, in this case, it's a little bit different because that pawn on a5 is sitting over there. You kind of have to pay attention to that, but just be careful doing this, okay? Knight to d4. Okay, we talked about the support from those pawns, right? White has the support here, black has the support here, so he uses it, he jumps in, and if white ever takes this, he's going to probably undouble his pawns, and now you've got this annoying pawn when you have to be really careful of because there's a rook behind it, and at some point in the future, this might cause white some problems. So, knight goes back. He's defending. He's avoiding the trades. Maybe he wants to go to d3 and attack these pawns. It's not really that simple because, for example, if you just jump in knight to d3 now, there's a tactic where the knight, I guess this one is actually the better way to do it. You fork the rooks. Yes, you're losing a knight, but the point is now you've lured this pawn away. It's no longer defending the knight, and the rook jumps in, and black's, going to probably win this game. So you can't just move your knight there immediately, okay? So rook to d6, Gukesh, I think, is getting ready to double up his rooks on the open file. King f1. G6 is played. Now, G6 looks like, okay, what is he even doing? Well, maybe he wants to play f5, right? Maybe he wants to move his knight, play f5, open up things here on the king if white just sits around and doesn't do anything. So Ding now decides to bring the rook back to the file. He does have this defended, so he's not worried about that. We get a rook to d8. f3, one thing that I like to do when my opponent has a knight, if you can push a pawn that is kind of directly opposed from it, you just sort of limit its options. Can't move forward, it has to figure out somewhere else to go. So I like that move. Also, it's a pawn chain, everything is supported. He gives his king some breathing room. If he wants to move it up and towards the center, he can do that. Right at the end of the game, using your king is very valuable. So all these things he's probably thinking about. King to g7. King to f2, he brings it up. h5 is played, so black is expanding on the king side. And then we get knight to e2, offering the trade. The knight goes back. And again, we have the rooks that can be traded, but instead he simply defends. And right at this moment, Gukesh plays the move knight to d4. Now, as soon as he plays knight to d4, you have to start wondering, are they going to make a draw? Now, let me explain this because I think there's a lot of people who are confused about how draws work. So there's quite a few ways you can get draws in chess, okay? Number one, a stalemate, right? If you're trying to checkmate and you mess it up and you get a stalemate, that could be a draw. Another one is if your king is in check multiple times, check, 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 check. That's called a perpetual check, and it could lead to the position repeating itself, right? That's also a draw. Another one would be the 50 move rule, where you move 50 times. No pawns are pushed forward. No pieces are captured. The game is draw. It's another one, right? But going back to that perpetual check, where you repeat the position from being checked, there are other ways to repeat the position that don't have to do with check. You could just get the same position, okay? And that's the rule. If you get the same position 3 times, it doesn't even have to be consecutive. It could just be like you had this position and some other things happen, and then you came back later and you had the exact same position, and then 3 times, the game is a draw. So we've already had this position once because he moved his knight, and then he moved his knight back, and then he went here, and he went here, right? And then knight e2, knight c6, knight c3, knight d4. They commit to a draw. Now, this is probably good for both players in a sense. obviously it's good for Ding because he's leading. Okay, he won the first game. So now with this draw, he has 1.5 and Gukesh only has half. And so if they continue to draw for the rest of the match, Ding's going to win. So from that perspective, he's happy, right? He's like, yeah, I'll draw the rest of the games, no problem, right? Now, he wasn't planning on just going for a draw because earlier, remember, he moved his rook away, right? Where was it? Was it here, right? He had the option here to just leave it and say, like, yeah, just trade everything. If he really wanted a draw, he didn't. He played rook c1. So that tells me, like, he's not just out to get a draw. Now, from Gukesh's standpoint, you had a rough first game. Okay, that was not how you want to start the World Championship. So I think just getting a draw with the black pieces is like kind of can calm him down. Like, okay, let me just settle in. This is a long match. We still have a long way to go. Like, let's just get the draw, get some points on the board, and we'll go from here. So I think both players probably are happy with this. There is a strategy a lot of times where if you can draw with black and win with white, that's pretty good at the top level. Now, obviously, that didn't happen last game, right? Ding was black and he won. So who knows what's going to happen, but here we are. And some people mentioned like that I wasn't explaining exactly why the game ended last time with why did they resign. So I want to make sure that I explain what happened here. So they both felt like there was no way to proceed without taking risks. I mean, you can always get crazy and start like throwing pawns forward and seeing what happens, but then you might lose, right? And so to play it safe, they both thought that it was an equal enough position, and you could see why. The pawns are like exactly the same pretty much. You've got 4 against 4, you've got 4 against 4, you've got the 2 knights against the 2 knights, the rooks against the rooks. Probably they're going to get traded because there's only one open file. There wasn't a lot to do unless you were willing to take risks, and that is why I think they agreed to a draw. So current standings, Ding Liren with 1.5, Gukesh with half. I'll see you guys tomorrow for round number 3. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.